A judge is temporarily blocking Kilmar Abrego Garcia from being deported to Uganda and will stay in ICE custody for now. Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador earlier this year. The Trump administration claims he's an MS-13 gang member, but has not provided any evidence of that.
So he was brought back to the United States to face human smuggling charges that stemmed from a traffic stop in Tennessee back in 2022. Abrego Garcia pleaded not guilty to those charges. He was released from jail on Friday and spent the weekend with his family. But yesterday, immigration agents took him back into custody.
Okay, and that's not the latest. A judge has already ruled that, hold on, temporary restraining, there needs to be things followed. Our chief legal analyst, Khalif Rhodes, joining us now to break this down. It comes down to due process. They're trying to send him to Uganda and said, wait a minute, he needs to be able to have a court hearing to contest this, right?
That absolutely is right. The Supreme Court has hit on a couple of things in the past, specifically about sending folks to countries of their non-origin, specifically third-party countries that the United States has already contracted with. And so in that ruling, they said that you have to give them an opportunity to be heard. Even if it's a brief opportunity in this situation, the judge is upholding that responsibility of them to give an opportunity to be heard and say, first, have you had any contact with his home of origin? Are they refusing to take him? That process has to occur. They have to present some of that type of evidence. But because those waters are kind of murky right now in terms of what that process looks like for them to actually contact this person's home origin, it seems like he probably will still be deported come Wednesday, 4 p.m. This is just a temporary hold. They have used him as a lightning rod for both sides of the immigration debate, and the side right now that is in a position of power to either remove or keep a person is likely going to succeed in removing him through this process. Ultimately, 2019, he was deemed not being eligible to be deported. However, with the Trump administration coming into office, he has been removed, brought back, and now ultimately will be removed permanently.
Khalif, have you ever seen that magic trick where you put a ball under 3 cups and you start to move the cups around and you try to remember where the ball? I feel like that's what's happening to Garcia, right? I'm not saying what he's done is legal or not legal. It's not even that in question, but what are the pathways forward legally for him? I mean, whether it's Uganda, whether it's staying, I mean, as far as this one immigration case, what can the judge do? And then on the appeal side, how much further is this going to continue to go?
Well, I take it and go political with my answer first. Is when Trump ran, he talked about, and I say President Trump ran, he talked about when he was candidate Trump, ensuring that we will get illegal aliens out of the country and folks that are committing crimes, we want to remove them. And he emphasized that, but if you're attempting to come here and you follow the process, then we won't attempt to remove you, right? The emphasizing like there's a process to lawfully come in here. Well, this individual did that. He came to this country, was seeking asylum, believed that he would be killed in his home country, went through the proper process. The court validated his response and said, yes, this person would die if he went back to his home country, so we're not going to make him deportable. Typically, those type of people historically in this country have not been deported. So to answer your question, I'm not sure. There is no crystal ball that I can look into except for to say that this government, if they find that you are here, I think legally or illegally, at this current rendition, it's a push to make sure that folks are deported in a record number, and some folks are getting lost in the crosshairs. I saw a young lady in Georgia in a similar situation that was wrongfully held in detention camp for 8+ days. Then they found out, okay, she's an actual U.S. citizen, and released her. So those are the types of things that are happening on a frequent basis right now, and we are partially, I think, participating in some human rights violation. And I'll pose the question to you. If you deport a person to a country that you know that has a lengthy history of human rights violations, and I'm not talking about light stuff, but major stuff, do you now feel like you have been complicit in those human rights violations? Uganda is clearly a location that has landed on everyone's list since the 70s. Forrest Whitaker in the movie The Last King of Scotland won an Oscar for portraying who? Idi Amin. If you know the history, in the 70s, he killed over 500,000 people in his country. That's where they're sending this person. That's history that we tend to forget. Well, those atrocities are still happening there. So it's not like you can say, oh, this isn't happening to us. It doesn't matter. We have an obligation as humans to not send folks where we know that ultimately you're likely to die going to a place where they're killing folks at that record number without any type of recourse.
Two-part question for you here, Khalif, because as you said, the U.S. government has deemed Uganda a level 3, which means you should reconsider travel before you go there because of what you mentioned. Does the U.S. have any duty to protect Kilmar Abrego Garcia once he goes to Uganda? Who's in charge of making sure he's okay, or is he left to his own devices? And also, what happens to his court case in Tennessee?
I think that the U.S., constitutionally doesn't have any duty to protect. I think humanitarian-wise, morality-wise, they have a duty, but constitutionally, legally, there's no duty. And I think the government has already said that, much as so. When he first went to El Salvador, the government said, we have zero control over bringing him back because now he's in El Salvador. I would rest assured that would be the same response if asked to protect or to ensure some type of safety for a person that's outside the borders of the United States, that the American response would be that we have zero control over what happens to him outside of this country.
But the charges in Tennessee just dropped then.
And that happens routinely. So I've represented individuals that are charged with a crime. I currently represent a number of folks that are charged that have also been deported while awaiting charges. Sometimes, and I would say historically, ICE would wait until the charges have been resolved, wait to a conviction, and then deport. But I've seen it where right now, and I have a young man that I'm defending that won't make it to his hearing because he's going to be deported this week.
Khalif, quickly, we're continuing to have Hispanic heritage festivals and things like that dropped, canceled here in our viewing area because of just fear of ICE deportations. I'm not saying any of those are legal or not legal, but what can people that are here, maybe illegally, or family members, like what advice do you give them? Like, at what point does this settle down where there's not that fear where they can go out in public?
The blunt answer is time. Obviously, if there's a different administration, there's a different approach. But currently with this administration, there has been a concerted effort to ensure that the administration has looked at immigration from a different perspective, that we're going to be more from a inward first focusing, America first approach. And in the process of doing that, if you're attempting to come here again, legally or illegally, it's going to be an uphill battle. Last week we talked about a different approach of looking at folks' social media accounts that are trying to enter, at giving a second look at the things that they're saying in terms of America first values, the process for getting in, the process for staying in, and even in the process for hiding in plain sight. It just looks different now. And so you will find that during this administration, that if you're not coming here and you don't have a stellar past and an outward-looking future that is connected to some type of monetary growth for the country, you're probably not coming in and staying in.
And our chief analyst, Khalif Rose, breaking that down for us. Khalif, thank you.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.